Subscribe our channel and press bell icon to get the notification of new video.
Like this video. Join our WhatsApp group to get daily latest updates. It's totally free.
Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a representative of an insurance company and a person who wishes to apply for life insurance.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5.
Now, to process your application, I need some details about you and about your medical history. Could you tell me your name, please?
Yes, my name is Rowlands. That's R-O-W-L-A-N-D-S. George Rowlands.
Thank you. And your address, Mr. Rowlands?
I live in Strathfield, at 52 Green Street. The postcode for Strathfield is 2135.
Strathfield 2135. Thank you. How old were you at your last birthday?
I was 35 on September the 10th.
How tall are you, Mr. Rowlands?
I think I'm about 170 or 175 centimetres tall. Let's say 1 metre 75.
And is your current weight your normal weight?
Oh, yes. My weight doesn't change much. I suppose I'm lucky, really. I've never had to worry about putting on weight. I'm always about the same, around 80 kilos.
Fine. Are you married at the moment, Mr. Rowlands?
Actually, that's one of the reasons I wanted to sort out some insurance. I'm planning to get married quite soon. I guess when you settle down, you start to think of things like that.
Yes, we often find people take out life insurance when some major change happens in their lives, like getting married or changing their job.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions
6 to 10.
Now, I've got some questions relating to health matters. We will, of course, be requiring a full medical examination, but I need some basic details from you now.
That's okay. I expect you need to know that I'm healthy, don't you?
That's right. Have you ever had a serious illness at any time of your life?
What would you describe as a serious illness?
Oh, not childhood things like measles or a bad cold, but a kidney disorder, say, or pneumonia or a cancerous growth?
Oh, no. I've never had anything like that. I've always been healthy, never been in hospital.
I'll just write none, then. And I'll put the same thing, none, for major operations, too, if you've never been in hospital. Do you have any medical conditions requiring medication?
No, not really. I take aspirin for a headache at times, but that's all. Oh, I guess you had better mention hay fever. I get bad hay fever in the early summer, and I take antihistamines then.
Yes, I'd better note down hay fever. Now, what about your parents? It's usually relevant to a person's medical history. Can you tell me if your parents are still alive?
My mother is still living, and she's healthy. But my father was killed last year in a car accident.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. It must have been a shock to you.
Yes, it was a bad time for the whole family. He had just retired from his job and was looking forward to doing all sorts of things. He was only 67.
It's terrible the way these things happen, isn't it? I've just got one last question, Mr. Rowlands. Do you smoke?
No, I don't smoke now. I used to, but I gave it up about 5 years ago.
Well, I think that's all for now. Thank you, Mr. Rowlands. We'll let you know the date and time of your appointment for the medical checkup, and after that we can finalise your application.
Thank you very much. I'll wait to hear from you.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a tour guide giving information about a historic house and the organisation that owns it.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16.
As you know, Holloway Estate is one of the few surviving estates in this area that still retains many of the farming features of the past. Let me quickly explain where you can find some of the key attractions. If you take a look on your map, we are now standing at the foot of the steps to the manor house. Can everyone see it marked with an arrow? Don't forget, this is our meeting point for when we leave. So, directly behind us is the fountain. From here, heading left, the path takes you to a gate which leads into the famous Holloway orchards, where for hundreds of years the estate has been growing its highly prized apples, cherries and plums. Incidentally, if you fancy trying them, a range of delicious Holloway jams and preserves are available in the gift shop. Speaking of which, the gift shop is to the right of the main house. If you go through the gate, the left-hand path takes you to the apiary, that's to say, the beehives, where Holloway honey has been collected for more than 250 years. And yes, before anyone asks, you can also buy Holloway honey. If you take the right-hand path, you will come to some old farmers' cottages, which have been renovated and are rented out as holiday cottages. Please feel free to admire them from the outside, but as there may be guests staying in them right now, please respect their privacy. From the back of the main house, crossing the car park, and just before you get to the cattle fields, you will find a row of 3 buildings. The middle one is the old dairy. The dairy is actually working, producing butter and cheeses using traditional methods. Next to that, on the left, are the former cattle sheds, where the livestock was kept. Nowadays it's used as a museum, so those of you who are keen to explore Holloway's farming past should pay it a visit. The building furthest from the manor house is the old ice house, which is no longer in use and is due to be restored, hopefully next year. Last but not least, you may have noticed on the way in that on either side of the main gates are 2 small houses. This is a traditional feature of country houses of the period. On the right-hand side, as you enter the estate, is what was known as the gatekeeper's lodge. This has now become the estate office, and the estate manager runs the estate from there. OK, I think that just about covers everything.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20.
OK, everyone, before we begin the tour of the Manor House, I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you about the organisation that now owns the estate, and for which I work, the National Trust. The National Trust is the largest membership organisation in the UK, with 4.24 million members. Our annual revenue is £494 million. At the present time, we have 5,899 paid members of staff and an additional 62,000 volunteers. That's an approximate number because new volunteers are joining us all the time. The Trust owns about 350 heritage properties. Many of these are large country houses that the owners donated to us because they could no longer afford to maintain them. The Trust also owns gardens and industrial monuments. The Trust's sources of income include membership subscriptions, entrance fees, donations, and revenue from the gift shops and restaurants within our properties, with much of the money raised being invested back in the preservation of the properties themselves. And, of course, this is the principal purpose of the National Trust, the conservation and protection of historical places and spaces, with a view to making them available to the public. As well as owning stately homes and houses associated with famous people, the National Trust has gradually extended its collection of art, and it also owns valuable books, clothing, furniture, ceramics, and all kinds of unusual objects. Now, if you would like to join the National Trust, I have the forms here, or you can visit our website and join online. You'll get unlimited access to hundreds of wonderful days out across the country. Lifetime membership costs £1,555, but most members join for a year at a time. Individual membership is currently £64 annually, but it's cheaper to join with your partner or another family member, as it'll be £108 for 2 people living at the same address. For a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children, a year's membership costs £114. It's a great gift for a birthday or other special event. There are lots of benefits to being a member. As well as free parking at all our locations, you receive a National Trust handbook full of information to help you plan your visits. And if you pay by direct debit, you'll receive a free pair of binoculars. Oh, I almost forgot. All members receive a free copy of the National Trust magazine, sent to you by post 3 times a year.
The end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear 2 students talking to their professor about the Science and Technology Festival they attended.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Dylan. Hi, Tanya. Thanks for coming to see me. I'm very interested to hear what you thought about the Science and Technology Festival.
Well, we're both very pleased we went.
Glad to hear it. Was there anything you both found especially useful?
Yes, definitely. I saw at least 2 lectures that directly relate to the subjects I'm studying in this first semester. I already feel a little more prepared than I did last week.
There wasn't anything that had the same effect on me, but that wasn't my only focus. I saw the festival as a chance to explore new ideas and other subject areas, so I also tried to attend some lectures that looked interesting rather than just the ones I thought would only be relevant to my course.
I'm glad I didn't do that. I get too stressed when I don't concentrate on one thing. But wasn't it great to be able to wander around the university and get a better idea of where everything is?
Well, I certainly feel more confident now I've explored the area a bit more. And I also found it very easy to meet people who share the same interests as me. When I was waiting for some of the lectures to start, I just got talking to whoever was sitting next to me.
I was too busy going through my notes to do that. I have to say, going to so many lectures in a short space of time has really helped me to improve one area of study, my note-taking technique.
I wasn't so sure about that originally, but looking at my notes again this morning, I could see how they got better as the week went on.
I'm glad the week was of use to you. It seems to change focus annually. Sometimes the emphasis is more on science, sometimes on technology, but there was an excellent balance this time. It really brings these areas of study and research to the attention of the wider world, and for me, that's the primary reason the festival exists. You may have noticed when you were there that there were a number of university information stands set up around the campus. Did you see the free reference booklets that they were giving out?
No, I assumed the stands were there to provide people with directions to each talk.
Well, their aim was to encourage everyone to read some of the latest studies coming out of our labs and classrooms. Many of the lecturers at the festival actually wrote the studies that were listed. So the talk and the booklets together are a great introduction to their work for anyone who attended. But the staff were certainly happy to point people in the right direction if it was needed.
I have to admit it was quite confusing trying to follow some of the signs around the campus telling us where to go. So we used the map and the festival guidebook to find our way around. It was great for that. And although one or two of the talks actually started at different times to what was printed on the page, one other thing I did like about the guidebook was that it wasn't full of adverts.
Oh, I agree. But that's always the case with festivals now. I don't mind that if it means that the festival is free to enter, as more and more of them are these days. And even if there is a fee for admission, the festival organisers hardly make any money from that, though they do tend to put the price of entry up each year. They have to make money to run the festival somehow, so it makes sense to get the majority of that through ads.
That's a fair point.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
So what next? Do you still want to write something for the department website?
Oh, definitely. Can you give us some advice on how we do that?
Well, it's a simple process, but it can mean a lot of work. First, you need to make sure that you have fully discussed and compiled the notes you made during the festival. For the next step, I would recommend selecting a set number of principal theories that generate the most ideas and summarize those. 4 is probably the ideal number. Then you'll need to go to the website and go through what people have written before. These posts will help you to understand which style seems most appropriate, how academic in tone you need to be, or how informal, and so on. And as this is going to be a joint project, it's really important to make sure that you both come to a joint decision about the best way to divide up the workload. Believe me, arguments can happen. Further to that, you should also agree on exactly when you're aiming to publish it, so establish a deadline. Make sure you don't go past the agreed date, as it will become more difficult to finish if you do. Then, after all this is completed, you're ready to upload your summary and any other documents and post them onto the department website.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Professor Dickens. Hopefully we can come back to you if we need any more help.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture about the history of locks. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back as we continue our lecture series on currency from ancient times to the modern day. For today's talk, we're going to discuss a need that emerged from an age-old negative side to human nature. When wealth is portable, particularly when it can be easily compressed into thousands of individual items of coinage, it inevitably becomes more attractive to a certain group of people. Even in ancient times, the wealthy, people of status, traders and so on, realised that to discourage thieves, their money would need to be either hidden or protected, and to do that they had a choice. They could either keep their riches safe by keeping them in temples, which were guarded 24 hours a day, or they could find a way to store their assets somewhere closer to home, where access was more convenient. And so the ancient Egyptians came up with a locking device. This was a mechanism similar to what is known today as a deadbolt that required the insertion of a key. The key operated a series of pins and allowed a long metal bolt to be withdrawn from its locking position, which in turn gave the owner access to their valuables. How long ago did this happen? We're a little vague on this, but definitely at some point later than 4000 BC. Since the Egyptians wanted their locks to be very strong, these locks suffered from one notable problem: their size. Some of the bigger examples we have found are over 1/2 metre long and weigh around 30 kilos. The Romans later adapted these Egyptian locks to make them more functional and available for use in regular homes. They took the Egyptians' designs, made them smaller, and added their own inspired invention, one that enabled them to create a more sophisticated locking system: steel springs. One negative side effect they did suffer from was that by using a spring instead of a bolt, it was relatively easy for a particularly dedicated and powerful thief to damage or remove the lock using brute force. However, the Roman locking mechanisms made it difficult to actually force the lock open, thanks to their precise construction. For their time, it's hard not to be impressed by such technology. The examples we have talked about so far are key-based locks, but next I'd like to look at a variation on this, the combination lock. The combination lock is the basis of many modern safes. As we will see, the combination lock shares many features of those used by the Egyptians and Romans. For the purposes of this explanation, I'll begin by looking at a combination padlock, which is easy to grasp. One of the most important aspects of any locking system is protecting the lock itself. In the case of the padlock, there's a secure outer casing to protect the delicate lock mechanism inside. This casing is usually constructed from a hard metal such as brass. Having this strong outer casing prevents a potential thief from simply breaking the padlock with a tool such as a hammer. The main movable part of the lock, the part which opens and closes, is a strong bar often made of reinforced or galvanized steel. As you can see, the bar is curved, almost U-shaped, but much longer on one side. At the end of this longer side is a metal spring which is pushed down when the padlock is locked. So how is a combination lock unlocked? The metal bar has 4 pins on it, which prevent it from being opened. However, each of the pins can be released by moving a combination dial. These are circular and numbered from 0 to 9. Move all the dials into the correct position and the spring is released, forcing the lock to open. Now, that is a very simple combination lock. The lock of a safe, on the other hand...
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.